be the consequences of sorcery and bestiality under the Mosaic Law? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Exodus on Walking Through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Exodus chapter 22. We're going to be reading from verses 16 to 24. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Exodus 22, beginning at verse 16. If a man entices a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall surely pay the bride price for her to be his wife. If her father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money according to the bride price of virgins. You shall not permit a sorceress to live. Whoever lies with an animal shall surely be put to death. He who sacrifices to any god except to the Lord only, he shall be utterly destroyed. You shall neither mistreat a stranger nor oppress him, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. If you afflict them in any way, and they cry at all to me, I will surely hear their cry. And my wrath will become hot, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives shall be widows, and your children fatherless. In chapters 21 through 23, God is giving his judgments that would become part of the book of the covenant, and thus part of the law of Moses. In these judgments, God was dealing with situations that might arise and how those situations should be dealt with. Sometimes when we make our laws are pretty specific, but application of those laws are difficult. God's law says that a person isn't to steal. However, what if I gave a possession to my neighbor to protect, and he was careless and allowed it to be stolen? If the thief couldn't be caught, am I to accept the loss, or is restitution owed to me? What about if someone else's cattle grazed in my field, a form of theft, but not by a person? Am I to accept the loss, or is restitution owed me? These are all situations that are dealt with here in chapter 22. In verses 16 to 24, we have more judgments of God concerning a whole host of different things. The first one deals with a man who entices a virgin who isn't betrothed. This is not rape. This is consensual sex between a man and a woman who is an unbetrothed virgin. Fornication or premarital sex was not to be a norm, but if it did occur, certain obligations were to be met. First of all, it should be said that this situation applied to an unbetrothed virgin. Betrothal was the beginning of marriage under the Jewish system, and although the man and the woman hadn't had sex yet, for the man was preparing a house and then would come and collect his wife, they were considered husband and wife. What would happen to a man and a betrothed woman who had sex would be dealt with later in the law of Moses. So let's remember, this dealt with a man sleeping with a woman who was not betrothed. What was the man's responsibility towards this woman? He was to pay the bride price and then marry this woman. Sex was not to be some casual thing, much like it is today. It carried with it a commitment. It was to be engaged in by married couples. But in this situation, since both the man and the woman consented to having sex, they were expected to marry each other. However, there could also arise a situation where the father of the woman refused to allow his daughter to marry this man. In that case, he was to pay the bride price for virgins, but would not marry the woman. Today in Western societies, fathers don't generally control who their daughters marry, but they did in this culture, and we should not look down on this culture simply because they had different norms than ours do. When it came to sorceresses, they were to be put to death. Sorcery is claiming to have magical power that one does not possess, and then often tricking people into paying you money in order for you to use this power. God is the only one who is all-powerful, and he will not have anybody claim any power to be like his own. A person was also not to lie with an animal, or they would be put to death. To lie with someone is the Bible's way of saying having sex, so nobody is to have sex with an animal, what we refer to as bestiality, or they would be put to death. Science refers to mankind as just another animal, but God views us differently, created in his own image. As such, we are not to engage in sex with animals, for such is an abomination to God, not respecting the difference between man and beast. Verse 20 further expands on the first commandment found in chapter 20, which is that Israel was not to sacrifice to other gods, but Jehovah only. Otherwise, they would be destroyed, put to death. In chapter 20, it is said that it is because the Lord has a righteous jealousy, not allowing anyone or anything to be worshipped except himself, for he is the only one deserving of worship. Verse 21 has to deal with strangers or visitors who might be dwelling in their land. This is important, for it is easy for those who are different than you, whether in different races, different cultures, or different religions, to be persecuted simply for being different. Israel was not to do that, and the reason God gave is because they were once strangers in Egypt, and they were to treat strangers in their land better than Egypt treated them. Verses 22 to 24 deals with the treatment of widows and orphans. These two groups of people are generally defenseless, and therefore God offers them special protection. Israel wasn't to afflict them in any way, whether through theft, neglect, or other means, or God's wrath would come down upon them and kill them. They were to care for the widows and the orphans, a principle that is repeated in James 1:27. Jesus in Matthew 23 pronounced a woe on the scribes and Pharisees for not following this commandment, showing that over time some groups in Israel were neglecting to heed all of God's commands. May it not be so with Christians today. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Exodus 22, verses 25 to 31, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
I'm not ashamed.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.